Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of First Samuel, and today we are covering the second last chapter of the book, chapter 30. Now, recall in chapter 29, it was at a time where the Philistines are going to war with against Saul, and the king of Gath, Achish, had brought along with him David and his 600 men. And if you recall, in the last chapter, the commanders of the Philistines were not comfortable at all having a Hebrew joining them at the back of the flank. And so they complained to Achish and, in all politeness, sent David and his men home. Now we carry on the narrative in chapter 30, verse 1, that they were on the way home to Ziklag. That was the town that King Achish gave to David and his men. And when his men left, they left all the women and children and whatever they have in Ziklag. So now they're going home. That's where the narrative picks up from. Then it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day. Now, this is important. It is on the third day uh, after the Amalekites had made a raid on the Negev, which is actually the south of the land. Negev means south, and on Ziklag, and had overthrown Ziklag and burned it with fire. So basically, what we're saying is when David and his men came back, it was already the third day that the Amalekites had taken everybody away, had burned it to the ground. All right, it's not like yesterday. And so when they arrived back, they had a shock of their lives, and they found that the Amalekites had took captive the women and all who were in Ziklag. In it means in Ziklag, both small and great, young and old. I think you would say that, without killing anyone. So no causing death. This is what it means. That they came and they took captives and they did not kill anyone and carried them off and went their way. And so the women and everyone in the city of Ziklag are now taken over by the Amalekites. When David and his men came to the city of Ziklag and they saw that it was burned with fire. Now, obviously, it's just the remnants of the smoke. Their wives, their sons, the young ones, their daughters had been taken captive and they had the shock of their lives. In verse 4, David and the people who were with him lifted their voices, wept until there was no strength in them to weep. They were very, very sad. So the idea of lifting their voices and wept, this is actually an A and a B. This is about lamenting. And they're crying, they're like mourning. What happened to everyone? They've been taken by the Amalekites. The narrative continues and says it's not only the people, David's two wives had also been taken captive. Ahinoam from Jezreel, Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel. So the two wives were also taken in the process. Verse 6, David was greatly distressed. Now, this word greatly distressed, we could think of it as dire straits. You could say that he has been, how should we say? Well, I guess dire straits is okay. dire straits. What does dire straits means? He is pressed on all sides. That's the idea. And he is in such a state because the people spoke of stoning him. Stoning means to throw stones, to throw stones at him. Why? Because the people, or all the people, were embittered. They were very bitter to their souls, or to their nephesh. Being bitter really means uh, being very angry, being very sore. These are all good words, right? The idea here is bitter, as in bitter water. They're not happy at all. The reason being is that each one, because of his sons and his daughters, both young and great, all taken away. Now, interestingly, they never talk about the women here. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Now, let's understand this word, strengthen. In verse 6, when it says strengthen, it means to cause himself, right? Cause himself to be strong. So this is the idea, is to be resolute. Yes, that would be a good word. Meaning he has to be more determined as to how to do things. And so he's actually being more resolute, be strong. Strengthen himself is to make himself strong. But the statement here is that this is not a psychological effect. He is making himself strong in the Lord his God, meaning he is actually shaping up his mind that his strength must be dependent on God. Not that he's actually lifting weights and trying to be strong himself, but in his mind, he realizes that he cannot do anything. He doesn't know what else to do. But the idea of strengthening himself in the Lord is to make himself strong, understanding more about how God is involved in this picture. There is no supernatural enhancement of his heart, of his emotion, of his strength. This is very much to describe a very visual imagery of David, that he is now looking at God, how to move forward. Now you're beginning to see that why David is seen as a man after God's heart, because when it is needed, he consults God. Now, when he consults God, just observe how he does it. And this is how David does his inquiry of God. So David said to Aviatar, Aviatar, actually, Aviatar, right now the priest, he is the son of Ahimelech. Now, you understand how the Hebrew people refer to a name, right? By giving a name, you have a role, just to make sure that we do not misunderstand who is Aviatar. And we give him a lineage as a son of Ahimelech, so that there is no ambiguity to who Aviatar really is. Now, the reason why they do that is because oftentimes you find that popular names are often repeated, but they are referring to different people. Why? Because the families like certain names, and these certain names are applied to different children along the way. And so you get people with the same name like Aviatar. But so to know which Aviatar is, we're talking about his role as a priest, And then he is the son of so and that so and so would be Ahimelech. So please bring me the ephod. The interesting thing about the ephod is that you have the umim and the tumim. And that's how they inquire of God in those days. So Aviatar brought the ephod to David. And so David inquired of the Lord. He asked of the Lord, what should I do? Now remember, the umim and tumim are two stones. And in the two stones, they are to draw lots. And so there would be options of what God might want him to do and which of the lot was drawn. And so the lot would be, shall I pursue this band? Shall I overtake them? The word overtake is to reach them, right? To reach them. Pursue means chase after. Can I chase after these men? And will I be able to reach them? And God comes back from the lots of various answers. And the one answer that came back is what is said, and he said to him. That's from the lot. Because the umim and tumim are two stones that you cast lots on to actually decide what God would say. So it says, chase them, for you will surely reach them. So chase and reach, and you will definitely rescue. Now, this word rescue is cause to deliver. So you will save them all. That would be the answer that God has given to David. And so with that in hand, he is now sure of what to do next. And then David went, he and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook Besor. This is brook Besor, and some were left behind, right? Some were left behind. So this is a narrative that begins to tell us that there were those who were left behind when they came to this brook Besor. So let's understand what the narrative is saying. In verse 10, David continues to pursue. So you need to know that we have this, and we call this brook Besor. And David comes with 600 men, right? 600 men. And they came this direction. And they crossed over the brook and continued, and David continued to pursue. That's what he means. David continued on. However, we're only talking about he and 400 men. And so David plus 400, which tells us that what happened here? There are no more 600. 200 stayed back to guard their belongings. And so 400 went to pursue with David. 200 stayed back. That's what it means. So 200 were too exhausted to cross the brook, remain. Now, this idea of exhausted, that's not quite the word. They weren't exhausted, they were faint-hearted. They were faint-hearted, meaning they are not willing to cross and go and fight the Amalekites. That's basically what it says. The 200 here is not prepared to fight. That's what it means. They refrained. They were faint-hearted and they refrained from crossing the brook. And so Only David and 400 men crossed over. That's how the narrative goes. Verse 11. Now they found an Egyptian. This is somebody from Egypt in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread and he ate, and they provided him with water to drink. Now this is restoring his spirit. And so we say here in verse 12, they gave him some food of fig cake, 2 clusters of raisins, dried grapes, and he ate. Now look at this word. Then his ruach, right? Then his ruach, that would be his spirit, his ruach, returned. That's what it means. The spirit was revived. It's not that his spirit left him, but the ruach is seen as the person that's inside of a being. And the idea of spirit here is like, he is well spirited. You've got a very spirited horse. It is about the sense of being alive. Okay, so let me just explain that. The idea of spirit here is the vision of being alive. The wind or the ruach or the spirit is active again. Now, do not be mistaken that the spirit left the person, right? So the way that the Hebrew expresses this is not that his spirit or his ruach left him and that he has to come back. It is the vision. Remember, in the Hebrew, it is always about looking at the Egyptian. When you look at the Egyptian, when they first found him, he had nothing to eat because he had not eaten bread nor drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, this whole idea of 3 days and 3 nights is a very common expression that has been for a while that he had nothing to eat and drink. And so because of that, his ruach is gone. And so what do you mean by the ruach is gone? So when you look at the Egyptian, he is like almost dead. Like his spirit has left him. He has no sense of life in him. He can barely talk. He can barely walk. So he has no sense of being alive. Not that he is dead. It's just from a visual cue, looking at the Egyptian, that you say that his spirit is gone. That's how it works. Now, it is important then for us to realize that by eating enough and drinking enough, his spirit returns. And so the vision, or when you look at the Egyptian, oh, he seems to be able to sit up. He can now talk. He can now breathe more. He can smile. He is more active. And that is what it means by his spirit returned. In verse 13, David then said to the Egyptian, now you can question him. Who do you belong? Now, why is this even a question? Who do you belong? Because the Egyptian is away from home, right? Number one, he is away from Egypt. Long way from home, long way from home. Number two, if that is the case and he's been left to die, he is seen as a bond servant, meaning he is the ownership of someone. He is not his own. That is what it means. Who do you belong to? Who is your master? So it says, who is your master. That is what this phrase actually means. Whom do you belong means who is your master. Then it says, and where are you from? Right? The answer is not Egypt, because if he belongs to a master, then the question would be, what is the origin of the master? So, where are you from is asking about the origin of the master, because he is a bond servant. Now, the reply from the Egyptian is this: I am a young man of Egypt, a servant of an Amalekite. My master left me behind when I fell sick 3 days ago. So that is why I'm suggesting to us that in verse 1, when David and his men came back in 3 days, it means that the Amalekite has already came and burned down the city of Ziklag 3 days. Then only David came back. And so this is what it means by 3 days ago, he fell sick. And so the master said, I don't want you anymore, and left me behind. And hence, David and his men found him. The narrative goes on in verse 14, says, we made a raid on the Negev. That would be the south of Judah. And this word is in verse 14, the Kereti, the Keretites. The Keretites is south of the Philistines, a seafaring group of people on that which belongs to Judah, on the Negev of Caleb or Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. So the south, remember, Negev is south, which belongs to Judah. In the south of Caleb, that would be Hebron. The land that was given to Caleb or Caleb would be Hebron in Joshua, right? Joshua chapter 14. And that's what he said. We went to the south of Judah. We also attacked the south of the Philistines, and we burned down Ziklag. Verse 15. Then David said to him, well, let me tell you this. Will you bring me down to this band of people who have raided Ziklag and burn it down? Now, the reply from the Egyptian is this. First of all, I belong to an Amalekite. And so swear to me by God. This would be by Elohim. By Elohim. And for some reason, they know that if David, a Hebrew, would be to swear by God, he must do it. And so it says here that you will not kill me, you will not give me to the hands of my master. If that is the case, yes, I will bring you down to this band. And so that would be the condition that the Egyptian did not want any repercussion from the owners, right? From his masters. That's what he means. And so in verse 16, when he had brought him down, down means he's going down to a lower terrain. And then it says, behold, which means this, when they brought him down, there would be a higher terrain and there would be a lower terrain. And David is on the way down. And then he sees all these people down there. That's the idea that we have here. Spread all over the land, eating, drinking, dancing, because of all the great spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. So we are told that these group of people are celebrating because of their success of raiding. Now, interestingly, their success is because there were nobody around to defend. And so they were very happy, and David is looking at them from a bit higher up. Verse 17. Now, 17 is a very interesting word. This is slaughter. It means that you can actually say that David scourged. What else? David conquered or attacked them. And this would be more than just attack. He went there to strike at them, to kill them. So it says that from the twilight until evening of the next day. All right. From the twilight, it means that this is sunset. Then it goes into the nightfall. And then you get the evening. So it is from this time right to the end. So it is a tomorrow. In the Hebrew sense, this is called tomorrow. And this is a very long process. Not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So there were 400 of them who just left. They could not withstand David's attack of 600 men. So David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken and rescued his 2 wives. The idea of recovering everything, this would be caused to rescue everything that the Amalekite had taken, including his 2 wives. The result is nothing of theirs was missing. So they found every single child, right? Whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything they had taken for themselves, David brought it all back. So it means that when they went to attack the Amalekites and slew them, and 400 escaped, within the confines of where they were, there were the sons, the daughters, and everything that was taken from them, they had brought it back. And also more, right? And also more. Verse 20. So David had captured all the sheep. Now, this word is not really sheep, right? These are the small 4-legged. And then you have the cattle. This would be the big 4-legged. What does that mean? Sheep could be, this word here is zone. It can mean sheep, it can mean goats, but basically the small flocks that move around. Cattle would be the oxen, the cows, the bigger animals, and drove them ahead of the other livestock. The other livestock would be the other animals that may belong to the Amalekites. Right? The Amalekites, or from Judah, or from the Philistines. These were not the ones that were taken from Ziklag. And so the other livestock would be behind them. So what they have is that they have the spoils that says that it belongs to David, because these are the men, women, and children, the things that belong to them. And then we have the other livestock, the other animals, right? Following from the back, and they were moving back to well, I won't say Ziklag. They were moving back to the brook, um, the brook. Okay, Besor, brook Besor. Verse 21. They said this is David's spoil, and this is about celebration and recognition of a successful rescue mission. Verse 21 says, when David came to the 200 men who were too exhausted to follow, this would be too faint-hearted to follow David, who has been left at the brook Besor, they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. Then David approached the people and greeted them. These would also be their family members as well. Verse 22. Now we have this problem. They're all the wicked and worthless men. Now, verse 22 are the men that came to went with David. Who were these men? They were evil. They were evil. In verse 22, the word wicked is ra. They were evil. And then they were wicked or worthless. They were good for nothing. Now we need to think about it, and then let me just discuss this first, right? These were wicked and good for nothing men who went with David, and they made noise. And they made noise because they said they did not go with us. They were faint-hearted. They were scared. We will not give them any of these things. All they have shall be his wife, his children. That's it. Let them all go home. Because all that we have, the spoil that we had recovered, would also be all the material animals that used to belong to them. That's the point. These are theirs, and these wicked and worthless, good for nothing men says, oh, let's not give it to them. But look at what David says. David says, you must not do so. You cannot do this, my brothers. With what the Lord has given us, who has kept us and guarded us and delivered into our hand the band that came against us. What does that mean? David recognizes that this is what the Lord has given. Even though they went to fight, it is recognized that God has given. So what does this mean? The wicked man or good for nothing man said, you never participate, so why should you have to share? David recognizes that if not God, there will be no win. That God has given to them means God has allowed them to reach them, to overtake them, and to conquer them, and to strike them, and to rescue everything, and to take over everything else that they have. This is seen as a gift of God, that when God allowed David to do so, through the lots that David had done, through the Umim and the Tumim, David followed the instructions of God. And yes, God has guarded us, that nobody died, and has rescued, given us to rescue everything that we had lost to the band. And so they are saying David is now being very fair. They are also our brethren. Just because they didn't go and participate in the raid doesn't mean they don't deserve it. Verse 24. And who will listen to you in this matter? Who are going to listen to you regarding this? For as his share is who goes down to battle, so shall his share who stays by the baggage. They shall all share alike. And so what does it mean? It means that there are people who watch the goods. There are people who went into battle. All right. So we have the battle people, we have the guards. Because if everybody went to fight, then who is going to take care of the things that they have brought? So now we have this. David is saying they will be treated alike, as if they went for battle. And so they shall share in everything. So it has been from that day forward that he made an ordinance out of this for Israel. And so this is now an ordinance of Israel. Do not underestimate those who didn't go. That is what it means. Verse 26, now David came to Ziklag. It was all down in amber. He sent some of the spoils to the elders of Judah, to his friends, saying, behold, a gift for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. Now understand that this is the things and livestock that belongs to the Amalekites, right? Amalekites. And so that's treated as a gift to the elders of Judah and to his friend, who are his friends, right? I can think we can do this. Who are his friends? Verse 27, and those who were in Bethel, and those who were in Ramoth in the south, and those who were in Yatir, and those who were in Aroer, and those who were in Sifmot, and those who were in Eshtemoa, and those who were in Rakal, and those who were in the city of the Yerah Me'ali, and those who are from the Kenites. And remember, in 1 Samuel chapter 15, the Kenites who were staying with the Amalekites were asked to go home first. Do not get involved into the warfare between Israel and the Amalekites. And so the Kenites were saved. And then to those who are in Hormah, and those who were in Bor Ashan, and those who were in Atash. Verse 31, and to those who were in Hebron, the Caleb area, and to all the places where David himself and his men were accustomed to go, this is a reward for their protection, right? Protection. That his men were always going there because it was safe. Because the people took care of David and his men. And so what did David do? David shared the spoils, not their own, but that belongs to the Amalekites. with all these people who had taken care of them. And that is David's way of making sure that those people who helped David and his men are duly rewarded. That would be the picture that's given in 1 Samuel chapter 30. And this is a just way. David is a man after God's heart. Those who went and those who didn't go all get the same. That's just. And David rewarded those who had protected them. That's just. That's a very oriental way of repaying for the kindness of the people who protected David and his 600 men. And with this, we come to the end of this narrative, how David relied on God, did what was told, recovered everything, rewarded those who didn't cross the brook of Besor, and also to all the Israelites who took care of David. They were all duly rewarded. And with this, we come to the end of our session today. The Hebrew word for adversary is Satan. Verse 4, adversary is Satan. And with this, let me explain a little bit. The word actually means adversary. It means an opponent, one who stands against. That's all it means, right? Adversary. And the Hebrew word is Satan. Satan is a noun that is defined by the verb itself. There is a verb for Satan, actually. So the word here is Satan. Satan comes from the verb. This is a noun. It comes from the verb also Satan, and it is to act as an adversary, right? To resist or oppose. And so with this, I think we just need to understand that Satan is not an angel, definitely not a fallen angel in the Old Testament. And you find that it is merely a very normal word, I would say, that the narrative is describing that maybe David could become a Satan to us, right? This is David. That is what they're saying. Maybe David, if they come in with battle, David could be a Satan to us. He could oppose us from the back. And that is how the word Satan is actually used. And not as the character in Job chapter 1 and 2.
So the Hebrew Bible actually uses the word Satan, is it?
Yes, exactly. The Hebrew Bible actually uses the word Satan.